Hi, this is Vince, meteorologist at the National Weather Service in Grand Forks. This video series takes a look back at the historic winter and flood of 1896-97. As a reminder, this is a three-part series. Part 1 covered the fall of 1896, Part 2 covered the winter of 1896-97, and this segment will cover the spring and flood of 1897. The spring and flood of 1897 covers the months of March and April 1897, and the spring flood of 1897. The deep snow cover led to a lot of early flood speculation. William H. Moorhead, an early settler who was known as High Water Bill, warned people that a major flood was coming. Another early settler, Charles Cavalier, said that in Pembina there was 5 feet of snow on the level. If melted in a barrel, he claimed it would make 3/4 of a barrel of water. Another common comment was that the early fall snow cover kept the ground from freezing very deeply. It was thought that a lot of water could just soak into the ground. This graphic shows the daily departure from normal temperatures at Moorhead, Minnesota for March 1897. On this graphic, the blue bars represent colder than normal days, and the red bars represent warmer than normal days. You can quickly see that most of the month had blue bars, or were colder than normal. However, the last 4 days of the month turned warmer and hurried along the snowmelt. Averaging the month as a whole, it still remains the 8th coldest March for the Fargo-Moorhead area. There were 2 record lows. One was for 32 degrees below zero on March 15th. During the late month warm stretch, it hit 54 degrees in Moorhead on March 31st. There was one notable blizzard event during the month of March. This blizzard brought more snow and blowing snow and very cold temperatures. Once again, the March blizzard shut down many of the railroad lines. At Point 1, Fergus Falls, the paper noted that the cuts had been filled back in with snow. At Hope, North Dakota, Point 2, the paper noted that the blizzard was big news, but people were getting sick of hearing about them anymore. At Pembina, Point 3, it was noted that the storm made a considerable addition to the snow pile. This graphic shows the total amount of snow that fell in March. The average was 8.2 inches. Moving into April 1897, the daily average temperatures looked kind of odd. The first few days of April were warm, then for most of the time from then through the 14th, the days were pretty close to normal, where the red and blue bars were small. However, this does make sense, as there was a lake of water surrounding Moorhead. Lakes react very slowly to temperature change. This next graphic shows the actual high and low temperatures from March 25th to April 20th of 1897. Remember, there was a lake of water around Moorhead from about the 1st of the month through the 14th. The horizontal black line represents 32 degrees. During the period of high water around Moorhead, the low temperature hardly ever dropped below 32 degrees, which led to a continual melt during this time frame. Then looking at the daily rainfall record during the same time frame, there were minimal rainfall amounts. If a heavy rain would have occurred, the flooding could have been much worse. At Moorhead, there was roughly 2 feet of snow on the ground in mid-March. This snow was entirely gone by April 1st. The late March, early April warm stretch steadily melted the snow. Roads became a muddy mess, as water covered huge portions of the prairie. Basically, there was an ocean of water that had to move through the river system. Is it possible to quantify how much water there was? During the flood of 1997, satellite imagery gave a good picture of how much water covered the area. This graphic tries to mimic what the high water levels in 1997 looked like on satellite imagery. However, the picture is not exact for any one moment in time. It shows the highest levels throughout the entire month of April 1997. During that flood, as in 1897, the highest water started in the Southern Valley, then continued to move north as the water in the south receded again. So, starting in the southern Red River Valley, the highest water levels occurred very early in April. Near Wahpeton-Breckenridge, Point 1, the Wild Rice River was a mad whirling torrent and washed away all the bridges. The Red River bridges in Wahpeton-Breckenridge were threatened by the high water. There was 4 feet of water over the roundhouse in Breckenridge. Near Foreman and Milner, Point 2, settlers along the Wild Rice River abandoned their homes, and bridges were swept away. The water rose so fast that farmers barely had time to escape. At Lisbon, Point 3, the snow disappeared very quickly and the meadows and ravines were full of water. Near Point 4, the Great Northern Railroad was under as much as 4 feet of water between Barnesville and Moorhead. Westbound railroad traffic was halted at Barnesville, so the hotels there were filled with travelers. At Sabin, people had to be rescued from their roofs. 7 horses, seen floating along a piece of ice, were found on top of a stable where the ice had lodged. Near Davenport, Point 5, the water stretched as far as the eye could see. The railroad line between Fargo and Wahpeton was also reported to be underwater, halting trains along that line. As the water moved into the Central Valley, flooding was bad along the Buffalo River, or Point 1. A bridge was washed out near Glendon. At Fargo-Moorhead, Point 2, several engines were placed on the railroad bridges to keep them from washing away. Barns, houses, and all kinds of things came floating down the river through town. Hotels were overcrowded and the overflow lived in boxcars. People also lived in the second stories of their flooded homes. It was said the water extended westward to Wheatland, North Dakota, 27 miles to the west. 20 to 30 miles of wooden sidewalks and wooden street pavers were washed away in Fargo. As there was hardly a dry spot in town, boats were in high demand. The boats were given interesting names by their owners, such as Cedar Block Sal, Island Park Idol, the Belle of Moorhead, and Wild Waves. At Halstead, Point 3, the Wild Rice and Marsh rivers combined into one big sea of water. Bridges, buildings, and other property were washed away. At nearby Purley, water broke out and flooded the town with 4 feet of water. At Point 4 Crookston, long stretches of railroad line were washed away, and hundreds of families vacated houses in low-lying areas. Finally, at Grand Forks, East Grand Forks, Point 5, all the bridges were damaged, even though the ice was dynamited out of the river to try to protect them. It was said that the water was 3 feet higher than the flood of 1882, when a steamboat landed on 3rd Street. As the water progressed into the northern valley, it continued to cause damage. At Warren, Minnesota, Point 1, the Snake River had risen so quickly that people sought out the highest and tallest trees to cling to. A steamboat was sent from Grand Forks to help save people and livestock. Across the river at Point 2, Manville, many farmers lost all their possessions. At Grafton, Point 3, the Park River rose 17 feet in a short amount of time, spreading out in all directions. At Hallock, Point 4, the Red River came within 5 miles of town. Steamboats could be seen moving about, and they had never been visible before. At Drayton, Point 5, the city itself was said to be the highest point between Wahpeton and Winnipeg. Still, the river was estimated to be at least 12 miles wide. Homes on the east side of the river were completely submerged. As the water deepened at Pembina and St. Vincent, Point 6, the local newspaper was shut down. Pembina was said to look like Venice, Italy. Across the river at St. Vincent, 30 people who were driven out of their homes shared a 14 by 20 foot shanty on the outskirts of the village. Finally, no issues were reported at Roseau, Point 7. To make matters worse, there was a thunderstorm followed by strong north winds on April 18th, when the floodwaters were still high in the northern valley. This turned the floodwaters into a raging sea with huge waves. These waves pushed on houses and structures, knocking them loose or damaging them. It was said that the wind pushed the water over a mile into areas that were previously dry, with the river levels dropping about a foot in Pembina. Drayton was also hit hard by the windstorm, causing the mayor to draft a letter requesting immediate aid. When the floodwaters finally receded, a farmer west of Hallock reported that his farm was so covered in debris it would take years to clear it all. The debris included organs, furniture, barrels, fanning mills, threshing machines, houses, lumber, and several fine pine logs, which were cut near Roseau. The flood of 1897 is no longer the highest crest for many cities along its path, but it still ranks in the top 5 for most. The flood could have been much worse, though. Some of the water did soak into the ground because of the shallow frost depths. Also, not much rain fell during the month of April. How many blizzards were there over the fall, winter, and spring seasons? That is really hard to determine, because back then there was no common definition for a blizzard. That led to confusion on exactly how many did occur. However, there were many, and people basically lost count. That concludes segment 3 of this presentation, covering the historic winter and flood of 1896-97. Hope this series was informative, and thanks for listening.